When I tell you that the night I walked into that bedroom, something inside me died. I mean it in the quietest, truest way. It wasn't the kind of death you can bury or mourn. It was the slow, hollow kind. The kind that takes your breath, your trust, your womanhood, and leaves you standing there, alive but empty. I still remember the sound first. Not the sight. Just the sound. A low whisper, a laugh that didn't belong to me. The kind I used to make when I was 25 and foolishly believed love could cure loneliness. My daughter Emily was the one who pushed open that door. God knows I didn't have the strength. Her hand was trembling, not from fear, but from knowing. A daughter knows when her mother's being betrayed, and when the door swung open, there they were. My husband, the man who once swore I was his everything, tangled up in the sheets with my own sister. My baby sister. The same one who'd slept in my lap when she was 10, the one I'd helped through college, the one I trusted with my home, my family, my secrets. I didn't scream. Emily did. "Get off her," she shouted, her voice breaking like glass. I just stood there, my heart slow, my mind floating somewhere outside my body. I could hear my husband's voice, clumsy and guilty. "Mary, it's not what it looks like." And my sister, her hair messy, her eyes wild, pulling at the blanket like decency could still be saved by covering herself. But you can't cover betrayal. You can't dress it up, wash it down, or pray it away. Emily was crying now, shaking, looking between us like her whole life had just cracked open. "How could you?" she said, her voice small, broken. You called her Aunt Rose. You said she was family. And I couldn't say a word, because everything I wanted to say sounded too small. What about our home? What about your vows? Why her? All of it felt useless in the face of that ugly truth. That sometimes, the people who promise to protect you are the ones holding the knife. I walked out of that room barefoot, my knees weak, my throat dry. I remember the floor felt cold, like it was trying to remind me that I was still alive. Emily followed me down the hall, calling my name, but I couldn't look at her. Not yet. I didn't want my daughter to see me fall apart. In the kitchen, the clock was still ticking. 11:47 p.m. Just 2 hours before, I'd been making tea for all of us. Rose had laughed about how quiet my husband had been lately. She said, "You better not be boring that man to death, Mary." And I laughed too. Oh, how foolish that laugh feels now. When Emily came to me, her face was pale. "Mom," she said softly, "do you want me to call the police?" I shook my head. "No, baby. You can't arrest betrayal." She stood there for a moment, then took my hand. Her grip was strong, firmer than mine. "Then I'll handle it," she said. And the way she said it, calm, clear, steady, it sent a chill through me. Because I knew, in that moment, that my daughter had inherited something from me. Not my forgiveness, but my fire. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room, the lamp dim, staring at the photograph on the mantel. Our wedding picture. He was holding me, smiling like he'd found the one soul who'd never hurt him. And maybe, in a cruel twist of fate, that was true, because I never did. But him, he'd just shattered 2 lives. Mine and Emily's. And he didn't even know it yet. When the morning came, Rose was gone. Her perfume still hung in the hallway, cheap and floral, like a ghost that wouldn't leave. My husband sat at the table, head in his hands, whispering apologies I couldn't listen to. I looked at him and said quietly, "You've destroyed everything that was pure in this house." He lifted his head, eyes red, voice trembling. "Mary, please. I made a mistake." I almost laughed. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is misplacing your keys. What he did was a choice. That day I didn't cry. I cleaned. The kitchen, the living room, the sheets. I washed away her scent, wiped down the counters, folded every towel. Because sometimes, when your soul is in ruins, cleaning gives you something to control. But Emily, she didn't say much. She just watched him, quiet, patient, calculating. I could see the storm behind her eyes. And I didn't know it then, but my daughter was already planning something. Something that would make him face what he'd done. You see, she loved her father. Maybe even more than I did. He was her hero, her protector, her guide. And when he betrayed me, He didn't just break my heart. He shattered hers too. And when a daughter loses her faith in her father, that's a kind of pain even the devil should fear. When I married John, I thought love meant safety. Not the kind of safety that keeps you from danger. The kind that keeps you from doubt. We didn't have much back then. A one-story house with wallpaper that peeled at the corners, a leaky kitchen faucet that dripped through every night, and dreams bigger than our paychecks. But I was proud of that little home. I painted every wall myself, baked bread every Sunday, and believed, truly believed, that love could hold everything together. John was quiet, dependable. The kind of man who ironed his shirts on Sunday nights and folded his socks just so. He wasn't one for big words, but when he said, "I love you," I believed him. His hands were rough from work at the post office, but gentle when he held me. Every Friday, without fail, he'd bring home flowers. Daisies if he was broke. Roses if overtime had been kind. I'd place them in the chipped glass vase my mother left me, the one with the crack running down the middle. That vase never broke completely, just like me. Our daughter, Emily, came 2 years later, all cheeks and noise and light. The first time John held her, his eyes filled with tears, he said, "She's got your eyes, Mary," and kissed her forehead like she was the most precious thing on earth. And for a while, I believed we were a family built on something holy. Then came Rose, my little sister. My mother's last baby, born when I was already a woman. When Mama died, Rose was just 12. I brought her to live with us, raised her like she was my own. I taught her how to braid her hair, how to balance a checkbook, how to pray when life got too heavy. She'd call me Mama Mary sometimes, just to make me smile. She was wild though. Restless. Always chasing something, love, excitement, attention. I used to tell her, "Rose, you've got the kind of beauty that can either bless or burn you. Be careful who you hand it to." She'd just laugh, twirl her hair, and say, "Oh, you worry too much." She had a way of lighting up a room, and John liked that. Everyone did. She was sunshine, loud, playful, unpredictable, while I was the steady shadow beside her. When she laughed, John's eyes would lift. I noticed it the first time at a Sunday barbecue. She told some story about her job, and he laughed longer than anyone else. I remember wiping my hands on a towel and thinking, well, isn't that sweet? But a quiet ache bloomed in my chest that I didn't understand then. Over the years, Rose drifted in and out of our lives. New boyfriends, new jobs, always running from something. And every time she'd fell apart, she'd come home. My home. "Just a few weeks, Mary," she'd say, her voice soft, tired. And I'd open the door, because family is family. Even when it hurts. John never complained. At least, not to me. But sometimes I'd catch him watching her. Not in an obvious way, just aware. The way a man notices movement at the corner of his vision. He'd say things like, "Your sister's got such a good spirit." Or, "You could learn to laugh like that again." Little words that seemed harmless, but each one left a bruise you couldn't see. Emily noticed before I did. She was 14, sharp-eyed and protective. One night while I was folding laundry, she asked, "Mom, why does Dad act funny when Aunt Rose is around?" I laughed too quickly. "What do you mean funny?" She shrugged. "He just looks different. He talks more. Like he's trying to impress her." I told her not to be silly. But after she went to bed, I sat alone in the quiet, folding the same towel 3 times over. When you've built a life around trust, suspicion feels like poison in your mouth. I pushed it down. I told myself I was tired, insecure, maybe jealous of my sister's youth. I prayed the feeling away. But the signs grew. One morning, I found Rose's lipstick print on a coffee mug that wasn't hers. Another time, John came home smelling faintly of her perfume, that cheap floral scent she'd always loved. And there were phone calls too, short ones taken outside, his voice low, his eyes avoiding mine. I remember asking once, gently, "John, who were you talking to?" He didn't look up from his plate. "Just work stuff, Mary. You wouldn't understand." And I said nothing, because I'd learned long ago that silence keeps the peace, even when it kills you inside. Then Rose came to stay again. Said her lease was up, needed a few weeks to get back on her feet. She brought laughter back into the house. Loud music, bright clothes, her lipstick on every cup. I told myself it was fine. Family helps family. But at night, lying beside my husband, I could feel the distance growing like a cold wind between us. Emily was 21 by then, saving up for nursing school. She worked late shifts at the diner and saw more than I did. She'd come home and find the three of us watching TV. John on one side, Rose on the other, me in the kitchen pretending not to notice how they leaned close when they talked. "Mom," she said one night quietly, "I think you should ask her to leave." I smiled weakly. "She's got nowhere else to go, sweetheart." Emily hesitated, then whispered, "Sometimes people don't deserve your kindness." But I didn't listen. Because I still believed that love, whether for your husband or your sister, could save what was breaking. Then came the day that changed everything. It was late spring, I remember. The air smelled of rain and lilacs. I was making tea when I realized both John and Rose were missing. Emily was upstairs, looking for her charger. She came down with a strange look on her face. Pale, trembling. "Mom," she said, "where's Dad?" "Probably in the garage," I answered, wiping my hands. She didn't believe me. "No. His truck's out front." Something in her tone froze me. I followed her down the hallway, barefoot, the old floorboards creaking like they were warning us to turn back. And then, that sound. That low, familiar laugh I used to make when I was young and in love. It came from the guest room. Rose's room. I remember Emily's hand reaching for the doorknob shaking. Mine too. And when she pushed that door open, the world as I knew it ended. But that's another part of the story. For now, all you need to know is this betrayal doesn't fall from the sky. It grows slowly, watered by trust, shaded by denial, until one day it blossoms, ugly and full of thorns. And no matter how strong you think you are, when it blooms in your own home, it steals something from you you can never get back. You'd think after catching your husband in your sister's bed, there'd be nothing left for him to say. But you'd be wrong. Men like John, they always find words. Smooth, heavy words that drip with guilt and half-truths. Words that make you question what you already saw with your own eyes. That morning after it happened, the house was quiet as a confession room. The air smelled of rain and shame. Rose was gone. She'd packed before sunrise. John sat at the kitchen table, face buried in his hands, whispering, "Mary, please. Let's talk, you talk," as if talking could sew the fabric he'd torn. Still, I sat across from him. Because after 23 years of marriage, you forget how not to listen. He started slow. "It didn't mean anything," he said, voice trembling. I looked at him, calm as still water. "Then why did it happen?" He flinched, couldn't meet my eyes. She was lonely. And I made a mistake. I almost laughed. Not the good kind. The bitter, dry kind that comes from a place you don't visit unless you've been truly broken. "A mistake," I said quietly. "You don't trip and fall into a bed, John." You looked up, tears brimming. "You don't understand, Mary. I've felt invisible. You've been distant for years." That was when I felt something in me shift. Like the earth giving way beneath my feet. Because somehow, even in the ruins, he found a way to make it my fault. I said nothing. I just stood, poured myself a cup of tea, and let his words hang in the air like smoke. When Emily came downstairs, she didn't speak to him. She walked straight past, eyes fixed ahead, her chin high. I saw the look in her face. Calm but dangerous. John tried to reach her. "Pumpkin," he said softly, "please, don't look at me like that." She stopped cold. "Don't call me that. You lost that right last night." He looked like someone had slapped him, but Emily didn't care. She turned to me and said, "Mom, I'm taking a few days off work. I'm not leaving you alone with him." I wanted to tell her not to worry, that I was fine. But I wasn't. The truth was, I didn't know what I was anymore. Wife. Sister. Fool. I just nodded. That night, John slept in the guest room. The same room where I found them. I couldn't bear the thought, but Emily insisted. "Let him feel the shame in those walls," she said. "Maybe it'll remind him of what he's done." For the first time in years, I saw my daughter not as my child, but as my protector. She moved through the house like she owned its justice. Every time he tried to speak to me, she stepped in. Calm but fierce. "You've said enough, Dad," she'd say. "Let Mom breathe." 3 days later, Rose called. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity, or maybe weakness, got the better of me. "Mary," she began, her voice shaky, "I didn't mean for it to happen. You have to believe me." I closed my eyes. "Didn't mean for it to happen. You've been sleeping under my roof for months. You smiled in my face while sneaking behind my back." "John was hurting," she said softly. "He told me you two weren't close anymore." There it was again. The same lie he'd told me. I realized then how well they'd rehearsed their story. "Rose," I said, voice trembling. "You're my sister, my blood. You sat at my table, you called me your mother." She started crying. I made a mistake. And I thought, funny how everyone calls betrayal a mistake. Like it just slips out of your hands. I hung up. I didn't yell, didn't curse. I just felt empty. That kind of pain doesn't scream. It sits in silence, watching the world lose its color. But Emily, she wasn't built for silence. That weekend, she came home with folders, papers, receipts. She'd gone through my husband's accounts. "Mom," she said, laying the papers out on the table. "You need to see this." I hesitated. "Emily, please." "No," she cut in. "You've protected him enough." There were transfers. Thousands. Money moved to a new account, in Rose's name. He'd been giving her money for months. Gifts, rent, hotel stays. My throat closed. "Emily, stop. I can't." But she kept going. "You said you were short on money for your prescription last month. He told you overtime was cut. He lied." That night, when he came home, Emily was waiting. "Dad," she said calmly, "sit down." He looked uneasy. "What's this?" "This," she said, pointing to the papers, "is every dollar you gave Aunt Rose." He went pale. "Where did you?" "Doesn't matter," she said coldly. "You took money meant for Mom's care. You lied to her face. Do you know what that makes you?" He opened his mouth, but Emily raised her hand. "Don't say mistake. Say choice." I wanted to stop her, but I didn't. Because somewhere deep down, I needed him to hear the truth from someone who hadn't spent half a lifetime forgiving him. John's voice broke. "Emily, I'm still your father." She looked at him, steady as steel. "Then act like it." He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "You don't talk to me like that in my house." Her eyes narrowed. "Your house? Mom paid half this mortgage. You lost your claim to it the moment you dishonored her bed." The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. He stormed out, slamming the door. The walls shook. When he was gone, Emily turned to me. "Mom, we're changing the locks." I whispered. "She's still my husband." She took my hand gently. "He was Mom. But not anymore." That night, she stayed up, packing his things into boxes. Shirts, shoes, old photos. She stacked them neatly on the porch. I watched from the doorway, tears streaming silently. It wasn't rage I felt. It was grief. For the love that died, for the years I couldn't get back, for the woman I used to be. At sunrise, John returned. The sight of his things waiting outside froze him. He looked at me, then at Emily. "This is how it is now?" he asked softly. Emily's voice was calm. "You made it this way." He tried one last time. Turning to me, eyes pleading. "Mary, please. Don't let her do this." And I? The woman who'd once believed love could heal anything. Finally found my voice. "I didn't do this to you, John," I said quietly. "You did it to yourself." He looked like he wanted to speak, but Emily opened the door wider. "Go," she said. "And don't come back." He picked up a box, glanced at me one last time, then left without another word. I watched his car disappear down the road, until it was just a blur in the morning light. The next few weeks felt unreal. The house was quieter. But it wasn't peace. It was the kind of quiet that comes after a storm, when you're still counting the damage. I'd sit in the kitchen some mornings, staring at the second chair across from me, half expecting him to walk in. Habit is cruel like that. But Emily was my strength. She handled the paperwork, called the lawyer, even changed the account passwords. She became the protector I never thought I'd need. One night, I told her, "You shouldn't have to carry this burden for me." She smiled sadly. "Mom, I'm not carrying your burden. I'm carrying your justice." And that was the first time I cried. Not for John. Not even for Rose. But for the woman I'd been, the one who kept forgiving, explaining, enduring. Because that woman was gone now. In her place stood someone quieter, stronger, scarred but unbroken. And though I didn't know it then, Emily wasn't done. She had one more plan. Something that would make her father face the truth in front of everyone. But that's a story for the next part. I used to believe a woman's heart could only break once. But that night, sitting at the kitchen table with the clock ticking in silence, so loud it scraped against my nerves, I realized hearts don't shatter in one clean break. They splinter. A little here, a little there. Until one morning, you wake up and find there's nothing left to give. It had been 3 weeks since we'd caught them. My sister had left town, her phone disconnected, her social media scrubbed clean like she never existed. My husband, on the other hand, had stayed, uninvited. He slept in the guest room and moved around the house like a ghost that refused to leave. Every time I saw him pass the hallway mirror, I wondered how the man I'd trusted for 27 years could wear such a calm face. "May," he said one night, standing by the sink, his voice trembling just enough to sound human. "We need to talk." I didn't look up from my tea. "About what? The weather? Or the woman you used to call my sister?" He winced. "I made a mistake. A terrible one. But you can't let this destroy the family." I set my cup down gently. "You already did that, Tom. The day you crossed that line, the word family died." He tried to reach for my hand, but I pulled away. I didn't yell. I didn't throw things. I just sat there and watched him crumble under the weight of his own words. For once, I let silence do the hurting. But my daughter, Lily, she was a different story. She had inherited my mother's fire and my father's sense of justice. Every time she looked at her father, it was like she was staring at a stranger who'd stolen her childhood. "Mom," she said one evening, "I can't stay here if he's going to keep pretending nothing happened." I nodded slowly. "You don't have to." She left for a few days, staying with her friend, but when she returned, she wasn't the same. Something had changed in her eyes. A quiet resolve that scared me more than her anger ever did. I didn't know then that she had already begun planning her father's reckoning. One morning, Tom came down for breakfast wearing a pressed shirt, holding a stack of papers. "May, we need to discuss the finances," he said. I remember feeling my stomach drop. I'd always trusted him with our money. The bills, the mortgage, the savings. But when I opened that folder and saw the numbers, my hands started shaking. Our joint account was almost empty. "Where's the rest?" I whispered. He swallowed hard. "I had to move some funds. Investments. You wouldn't understand." "Don't you dare," I said, my voice breaking for the first time. "Don't you dare talk down to me like I'm a fool. You gave my sister my money." His silence was answer enough. That was the night I broke. I locked myself in my bedroom, shut the curtains, and cried until the morning light crept through the cracks. I thought about every Sunday dinner, every anniversary card, every late night laugh that now felt like part of a lie. I wanted to hate him, but mostly, I hated myself. For trusting him, for ignoring the signs, for being too afraid of loneliness to see the truth. It was Lily who pulled me out of that darkness. She came home with a folder in her hand, and determination in her eyes. "Mom," she said, sitting beside me, "you're not crazy. You're not weak. And you're not alone anymore." "What's that?" I asked. "Proof," she said simply. "He's been transferring money to Aunt Carol's account for months. But he made one mistake. He used your business account once. That means you have legal grounds to file a claim." I stared at her, unsure whether to cry or hug her. "How did you find this?" She smiled faintly. "You forget, Mom, I majored in accounting for a reason." It was then that I realized my daughter wasn't just my child. She was my strength, molded from every pain I'd endured. That week, she helped me meet a lawyer. A kind, middle-aged woman named Marlene who listened more than she spoke. When I told her everything, from the affair to the money, she just sighed and said, "You've been holding a lot, haven't you, Mrs. Whitaker?" I thought holding it all together was what wives were supposed to do. She smiled sadly. "Sometimes holding on is what breaks us the most." Those words became my lifeline. For the first time in months, I started to breathe again. I stopped cooking his meals. I stopped washing his clothes. I stopped pretending. Every small act of defiance felt like reclaiming a piece of my soul. And Lily, she made sure her father saw every ounce of what he had lost. She didn't yell or curse. She didn't slam doors. She did something far worse. She ignored him. When he spoke, she left the room. When he asked for help, she turned away. The silence she gave him was heavier than any punishment I could have imagined. One evening, I overheard her say, "You taught me one thing, Dad. Love without respect isn't love. It's servitude. And I'll never serve a man who disrespects my mother." He didn't respond. He just stood there, eyes wet, realizing too late that his daughter's forgiveness was a door that had already closed. The day I served him the divorce papers, he looked at me like a man who'd lost his reflection. You're really doing this?" "Yes," I said softly. "I'm doing what I should have done the day you betrayed me." He nodded, a broken sound escaping his throat. "I never thought you'd have the strength." I looked him straight in the eye. "That's the thing, Tom. You never really saw me." When he finally walked out of that house, suitcase in hand, I didn't cry. I just stood by the window and watched the taillights fade into the distance. For the first time in years, the house felt quiet, but not empty. Because somewhere deep inside, beneath the hurt and betrayal, something had begun to bloom again. Something fierce, something peaceful. Freedom. I sat in my garden that evening, the same one my sister and I used to tend together, and watched the sun dip below the horizon. The air smelled of lilacs and rain. Lily came outside, sat beside me, and took my hand. "Are you okay, Mom?" she asked. I smiled faintly. "Not yet. But I will be." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "He doesn't deserve you." "Neither of them do." I nodded. "Maybe not. But I deserved better. And that's what I'm giving myself now." We sat there in silence, watching the stars blink awake, their light soft but unyielding. And in that moment, I realized I hadn't lost everything. I had lost what was false, and found what was true. You never really know the weight of silence until it becomes your only companion. In the weeks after Tom left, the house echoed differently. The walls, once heavy with his footsteps, began to breathe again. The kettle's whistle didn't startle me anymore. Even the creak of the old wooden floorboards sounded like an old friend saying, "You made it through another day." But grief has a strange way of lingering, doesn't it? It hides behind the smallest things. The coffee mug he used every morning, the empty space beside the bed, the sound of a man's voice on television that makes your chest tighten before you even realize why. Still, life, in all its quiet cruelty and mercy, keeps moving. One morning, as I was pruning the rose bushes, my neighbor Mrs. Harlan stopped by. She was one of those women who always knew when something wasn't right, but never pushed until you were ready. She handed me a basket of muffins and said, "You look thinner, May, and not the good kind of thinner." I laughed softly. "I guess heartbreak burns calories." She smiled in that way women do when they recognize another's pain. "Heartbreak also burns illusions, dear. And once they're gone, you finally see who you really are." Those words stayed with me long after she left. Because I was beginning to see, not the wife I had been, but the woman I was becoming. A few days later, Lily came home with an envelope. Her eyes were bright, not with joy, but with purpose. "Mom," she said, placing it on the table, "you got approved for the small business grant." I blinked, confused. "What grant?" "The one I applied for on your behalf," she said, smiling. "Remember your candle business? You said you didn't have the heart to start over. Well, someone had to believe in you, even if it wasn't you." I felt the tears before I even understood them. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. It was true. A 10,000 grant for women entrepreneurs starting home-based businesses. I couldn't speak, I just looked at my daughter, this strong, brave young woman who had walked through fire beside me, and whispered, "You believed I could do this." She smiled through her tears. "You taught me what strength looks like, Mom. You just forgot to see it in yourself." That night, I lit a single candle and placed it on the windowsill. It wasn't for romance or nostalgia. It was for rebirth. For every woman who had ever been told she wasn't enough, and finally decided to prove them wrong. The first few weeks of my candle business were messy but meaningful. The house smelled like lavender, sandalwood, and sometimes burnt wax. I laughed at my mistakes, took notes, watched tutorials. I sold my first batch at the church fair, and when the first woman handed me $20 for a candle I'd poured myself, I nearly cried. It wasn't about the money. It was about the worth. And slowly, through that craft, I began piecing myself back together. I spent mornings blending oils and afternoons journaling. I wrote about forgiveness, not for Tom, not for my sister, but for myself. For the years I spent trying to be a perfect wife instead of a happy woman. And in those quiet evenings, as the house glowed with the light of my own making, I realized something powerful. Peace doesn't come from revenge. It comes from reclaiming what was stolen. Your joy, your dignity, your dreams. But fate wasn't done testing me just yet. One afternoon, I was packaging candles when there was a knock at the door. When I opened it, I nearly dropped the box in my hands. It was Tom. He looked smaller somehow, not in size, but in spirit. His hair had grayed at the edges, and the confidence that used to roll off him like cologne was gone. "May," he said softly. "Can I come in?" I hesitated. Every part of me wanted to slam the door, but something inside whispered, "You don't need to prove you've moved on. You just need to show it." So I stepped aside. 5 minutes. He walked in slowly, glancing around the living room like it was a museum of a life he no longer belonged to. His eyes stopped on the candles stacked neatly by the window. "You're making these?" "Yes," I said, wiping my hands. "It's called May's Light." He smiled sadly. Fitting. That we sat at the table, the same table where I'd found the courage to end our marriage. He cleared his throat. "I wanted to say I'm sorry. Not that it means much now. But I've had time to think. I ruined the best thing I ever had." I didn't say anything. I just listened. He went on, his voice trembling. "Carol's gone. She left when the money ran out. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed to tell you that you didn't deserve what I did." I looked at him for a long time before speaking. "You're right, I didn't. But maybe you needed to lose me to learn what love isn't." His eyes filled with tears. "Do you hate me, May?" I shook my head gently. "No, Tom. Hate takes too much energy. I'm saving mine for better things." He nodded defeated and stood to leave. At the door he paused. "You look happy," he said softly. "I am," I replied. "But it took losing you to find it." When the door closed behind him, I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. I just exhaled, long and deep, like a bird finally free of its cage. The next morning, I called Marlene, my lawyer, to finalize the divorce settlement. She congratulated me for handling everything with grace. "You'd be surprised," she said, "how many women crumble under the weight of betrayal. But you built something from it." I smiled. "That's the thing about broken glass, Marlene. You can either bleed from it or make a mosaic." That evening, I decided to host a small gathering. New beginnings, dinner, I called it. Mrs. Harlan brought her famous peach cobbler. Lily invited a few close friends, and for the first time in years, the house was filled with laughter that didn't hide pain behind it. As we ate, I noticed how Lily glowed. Her laughter unburdened. Her eyes soft again. Later that night, when everyone left, she hugged me tight. "You did it, Mom," she whispered. "You really did it." And I realized she wasn't just talking about the candles, or the grant, or even the divorce. She was talking about me. A week later, I received an invitation in the mail. It was from the Women's Business Council, asking me to speak about resilience and entrepreneurship. At first, I laughed. Me, the same woman who once believed her life was over, now being asked to inspire others, but I went. Standing in that small hall in front of 50 women, Some young, some with hair as gray as mine. I told my story. I didn't glamorize it. I didn't hide the tears. I spoke of the night I found out, the days I couldn't eat, the moment I realized I'd been loving everyone but myself. And when I finished, there was silence, the kind that comes right before healing. Then a woman in the front row stood up, tears streaming down her face, and said, "Thank you." I thought I was the only one. I walked off that stage lighter than I'd felt in years. That night, I found myself sitting on the porch, the scent of lavender candles drifting through the air. Lily came outside with 2 cups of tea and sat beside me. "You were amazing today," she said. I smiled softly. "I just told the truth." She looked at me, her eyes full of something I hadn't seen since she was little. Admiration. "You taught me that strength isn't about fighting. It's about rising." I reached for her hand. "And you taught me that sometimes, the children we raise become the ones who save us." The moon hung low that night, silver and kind. The air was cool, the world quiet. And for the first time, I didn't feel like a woman recovering from pain. I felt like a woman reborn. A few months later, I opened a small shop downtown. It wasn't much. Just a cozy little space with shelves lined with candles and a hand-painted sign that read "May's Light." From darkness to glow. Every customer who walked through that door carried their own story of heartbreak or hope. Some bought candles for weddings, others for goodbyes, and every time someone said, "These smell like peace," I smiled, because that was exactly what I had poured into them. Peace. The kind that comes not from forgetting the past, but from forgiving yourself for living through it. One evening, as I was closing up, Lily stopped by with flowers. "For you," she said. "You deserve every bit of this new life." I hugged her tight. "You know, sweetheart, I used to think I lost everything. But now I see. I just lost what wasn't meant for me." She smiled. "So, what happens next for you, Mom?" I looked around the shop, the soft glow of candles dancing across the walls. "Next," I said with a gentle laugh, "I think I'll just keep lighting the way, one flame at a time." That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about how far I'd come. From a wife betrayed to a woman reborn, from silence to strength, from pain to peace. And somewhere in the quiet, I heard my mother's voice, soft and steady, whisper, "You did good, May. You finally chose yourself." I smiled in the dark, whispering back, "Yes, Mama. I finally did." There are moments in life that don't come with thunder or lightning. Just a soft whisper in the heart that says, "It's time." That's what it felt like that morning. No storm. No chaos. Just quiet. The air was cool, the sky pale with dawn, and for the first time in a long while, I woke up without the weight of yesterday pressing on my chest. But even as I stood at the window, watching the light stretch across my garden, I knew something unfinished lingered, like a letter I'd written but never sent. That letter had a name. Carol, my sister. For months, I'd avoided thinking of her beyond the pain she caused me. I had folded that memory into the darkest corner of my heart, hoping time would make it disappear. But time doesn't erase what the soul still needs to understand. And I realized that morning, I couldn't heal while pretending she didn't exist. So I decided to find her. Not to reopen old wounds, but to close them properly. It took only one phone call to an old cousin to learn where she'd gone. A small town 2 hours away, working as a cashier in a grocery store. The news didn't shock me. Carol had always been a drifter. Even when we were children, she was restless, chasing attention the way others chase sunlight. I remember once, when we were little, Mama found Carol crying behind the barn. She'd lost her favorite ribbon, and the world had ended for her. Mama tied a new one in her hair and said, "You'll lose prettier things than ribbons, baby. But don't you go breaking other hearts trying to replace them." I didn't understand those words then. But I did now. The drive was long and quiet. Every mile I drove felt like shedding another layer of anger. I passed the church where we'd once sung together, the lake where we used to swim in summer, the diner where she'd stolen my first boyfriend's attention without even meaning to. By the time I reached that little grocery store, my heart wasn't burning anymore. It was just tired. When I stepped inside, the air smelled of detergent and old bread. And there she was, Carol, behind the counter, hair tied back, her face pale and thinner than I remembered. She looked up when she saw me, and for a second, the world just stopped. "May," she whispered, her hand freezing mid-scan over a carton of milk. I nodded slowly. "It's me." The customer beside her shifted awkwardly, sensing the weight between us. I waited until the line cleared, then she motioned for me to step aside. We stood there in silence for a long moment. Two sisters bound by blood, divided by choices. "You look well," she finally said, her voice trembling. "I am," I replied softly. "But not because of you." She flinched, eyes watering. "I didn't come looking for you because I knew I had no right." I took a deep breath. "You had every right, Carol. You just didn't have the courage." Her lip quivered, and for the first time, I saw not the woman who betrayed me, but the little girl who'd always needed too much love and never knew how to keep it. "I loved him, May," she said quietly. "I know that doesn't make it right. But I did." I felt a strange calm wash over me. "No, it doesn't make it right. But maybe understanding doesn't need to mean accepting." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "He said he'd leave you, that you didn't care for him anymore. I believed him." I nodded slowly. "He lied." "But you wanted to believe him, didn't you?" Her shoulders sagged, the weight of her choices pressing down like stones. "Yes," she whispered. "I did." For a moment, I didn't say anything. The anger that had lived inside me for so long, the kind that twisted every breath and soared every dream, felt suddenly small. "I came here today," I said softly, "not to forgive what you did, but to forgive what it turned me into." She looked at me, confused. "What do you mean?" "I let your betrayal make me bitter. I stopped trusting love, stopped trusting myself. But I've learned that bitterness is just grief that overstayed its welcome." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "I don't deserve your forgiveness." I smiled sadly. "It's not a gift for you, Carol. It's a gift for me." As she covered her face, sobbing quietly. For a moment, I wanted to hold her, like the old days. But something inside whispered, "No, this is not your burden to carry anymore." So instead, I said gently, "I wish you peace, Carol. Truly." And then I turned and walked away. When I stepped outside, the sunlight hit my face like a blessing. I stood there breathing it in, feeling lighter than I had in years. It wasn't triumph I felt. It was release. That night, I sat by the window, candle flickering beside me, and watched the flame dance. I thought about Mama. About how she'd tell us that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It just means you're tired of hurting. And Lord, was I tired. For years, I had carried everyone else's mistakes like they were my own. I blamed myself for my husband's betrayal, for my sister's weakness, for maybe I could have stopped it, that echoed in my mind. But in that moment, I realized something so simple, so pure. I didn't cause their choices. I only lived through them. And that made me a survivor, not a fool. The next morning, Lily found me sitting on the porch, coffee in hand, smile on my face. "You look peaceful," she said, sitting beside me. "I am," I whispered. I finally let it go. She tilted her head. "Did you see her?" "Yes," I said softly. "And I saw myself, too. The version of me who used to think forgiveness was weakness." Lily smiled, reaching for my hand. "You've always been stronger than you think, Mom." I looked out at the sunrise. Strength isn't always about holding on, baby. Sometimes it's knowing when to put it down. We sat there in silence, listening to the world wake up. Birds singing, leaves rustling, the hum of a distant lawnmower. It was the kind of peace that doesn't need applause. Just breath. Just presence. Weeks passed and I kept growing into that peace like a new skin. The shop flourished. Women came from nearby towns to buy my candles, not because they were perfect, but because they were made from pain that found purpose. One afternoon, a woman walked into the shop, middle-aged, tired eyes, trembling hands. She said, "I heard your story, Miss May. My husband left me for my sister last year. I don't know how to go on." I took her hands gently and said, "You don't go on the same. You go on different." But that's not a bad thing. It means you're becoming who you were meant to be. She cried, and I held her, not as a business owner, but as one soul who recognized another's ache. After she left, I realized my pain had become a bridge. What once broke me now helped others cross. One night I dreamed of Tom. He was standing by the lake, the same one where we used to take Lily when she was little. He looked younger somehow, but sad. Not with guilt, but with regret that had settled deep in his bones. In the dream, he said, "Ma, I see now what I lost." And I replied, "Then I hope you also see what you taught me. That love built on lies cannot last." When I woke up, I didn't feel haunted. I felt healed. Because I knew I didn't need an apology from him anymore. His lesson had already been learned. Months later, I visited Mama's grave for the first time since everything happened. I brought a candle, lavender, her favorite scent, and set it beside the headstone. "I finally did it, Mama," I whispered. "I forgave them. And I forgave myself." The wind brushed through the trees, and I could have sworn I heard her voice again. "That's my girl." I smiled through my tears, knowing she'd been watching all along, waiting for me to come home to myself. That evening, Lily and I sat on the porch again, sipping sweet tea as the sun dipped low. She said, "Do you ever wish it hadn't happened? That Dad and Aunt Carol hadn't?" I shook my head gently. "No. If it hadn't, I might never have found me." She looked at me thoughtfully. "So you don't hate them?" "No, baby. Hate's a heavy thing. I'd rather carry peace." We watched the fireflies flicker in the distance, and I realized something beautiful. I wasn't waiting for closure anymore. I was living it. When I closed up shop that night, I lit one last candle and placed it by the window, like I did the first night this new chapter began. But this time, I whispered something different. Thank you. Not to them. Not to the ones who hurt me. But to life itself. For breaking me open just enough to let the light in. And as that flame flickered, steady and warm, I finally understood the quiet truth Mama had tried to teach me all those years ago. You can't always choose who breaks your heart. But you can choose who gets to heal it. The world has a way of going on, even after your heart's been broken. The sun still rises, dishes still pile up, the mail still comes. At first, that feels cruel, like the world should stop and mourn with you. But then, one quiet morning, you realize that same rhythm is your mercy. It's life saying, "Come back when you're ready." I've been waiting. That's where I am now, back. Not to the woman I was before the pain, but to the woman who walked through it and came out softer, not smaller. It's been a year since everything happened. A year since I watched the man I loved walk away with my sister, and the daughter I raised teach me what courage really looks like. Time doesn't erase the past, but it smooths the edges. Now, when I think of Tom, I don't feel that sharp twist in my chest anymore. I just feel a quiet sadness. Like looking at an old photograph of a life that no longer fits. Sometimes, I still catch myself setting 2 cups on the table by habit. Then I smile and pour one out for me instead. Because I finally understand. I was always enough. He just wasn't meant to see it. I've rebuilt my world, one small joy at a time. My candle shop has become a place of stories. Women come in carrying their own heartbreaks, and leave with light in a jar. Each scent I make tells a chapter of healing, a lavender for peace, a cedarwood for strength, a vanilla for forgiveness. When I hand someone a candle, I tell them, don't just light it, listen to it. Because healing doesn't roar, it hums. It speaks in the small acts. Watering your plants again, humming in the kitchen, forgiving yourself for smiling too soon. Lily visits often. She's working in another city now. Strong and fearless. Just like I prayed she'd be. Sometimes she'll tease me, saying, "Mama, you've turned into some kind of local philosopher." And maybe she's right. Pain has a way of turning ordinary women into wise ones. We learn to read people's silences, to find meaning in half smiles, to know that the softest hearts are often the ones that survive the most storms. One evening, she came home early, holding a small wrapped box. "Don't open it yet," she said, grinning. "Wait till after dinner." So I waited. When I finally unwrapped it, I found a delicate silver bracelet with a small charm shaped like a candle flame. On the back, she'd engraved, "From broken to burning bright." I cried, right there at the kitchen table. Not the heavy tears of grief, but the kind that wash your soul clean. She hugged me tight and said, "You taught me that light doesn't come from what we've lost, but from what we choose to become." That moment, that was my redemption. Not revenge, not validation. Just love, coming full circle. Sometimes, on quiet nights, I still talk to Mama. I'll sit out on the porch, the sky heavy with stars, and I'll whisper, "You were right, Mama. Pain ain't punishment. It's polish." Because I see it now. All the breaking, all the tears. They weren't to destroy me. They were to shape me. Every crack became a path for light to seep in. Every loss taught me what I still had. And every betrayal carved space for something truer to take root. A few weeks ago, I got a letter. It was from Carol. Just 2 pages, folded neatly, no return address. She wrote, "Ma, I wanted to say thank you. Not for forgiving me. I know I didn't deserve that. But for seeing the part of me I couldn't see myself. I've started over. I'm working, I'm sober. And I'm learning how to be alone without feeling lonely. I hope one day, I can make peace with the girl I used to be. Until then, thank you for not hating me enough to curse my name. Love, Carol." I read it twice, then folded it gently and placed it in my Bible. Not to forget it, but to keep it where grace lives. Forgiveness, I realized, isn't about erasing people. It's about freeing yourself from needing them to fix what they broke. When people ask me now, "May, after all that, do you still believe in love?" I smile and say, "More than ever." Because love isn't what hurt me. It's what healed me. Real love isn't just romance. It's the hand that reaches out when you've fallen. It's your child defending your dignity when you couldn't speak. It's a stranger's kind word when you think no one sees you. And sometimes, it's your own reflection, finally saying, "I forgive you for not knowing better before you did. I used to think strength meant never breaking. Now I know it means breaking open. And still choosing to be kind. It means waking up after betrayal and still believing the world can be beautiful. It means trusting again, not because everyone deserves it, but because you deserve peace." Every Sunday, I still light one candle for the past. For the love that turned sour, for the trust that shattered, for the girl I once was. And then I light another for the future. For the woman I've become. For the peace that finally found me. For every woman still waiting for her dawn. And as the 2 flames flicker side by side, I whisper the same prayer. May pain make you tender. May betrayal make you wise, and may forgiveness make you free. People sometimes stop by the shop and ask, "Miss May, how did you survive what you went through?" And I always tell them the truth. I didn't survive it. I was reborn by it. Because when everything falls apart, you get to decide who you'll be when you stand back up. And if you choose peace, if you choose grace, you don't just heal yourself. You heal generations that come after you. The other day, I saw a young couple walking hand in hand down Main Street. The way he looked at her, soft, sure, unguarded, it made my heart swell, not with jealousy, but with hope. Because love, real love, isn't a fairy tale. It's 2 people choosing each other, every day, through the mess and the mercy. And maybe I won't have that kind again in this lifetime. But that's all right. I've got something better. Peace that doesn't depend on anyone else. Sometimes I close the shop early and drive down to the lake. The same lake from my dream. I sit by the edge, dip my feet in the water, and watch the ripples stretch out like silver threads. That's what healing feels like. A ripple that keeps moving outward, touching things you didn't even know needed softening. I'll leave you with this, child. If someone watching this right now has been betrayed, broken, or forgotten, remember, you are not what they did to you. You are what you do next. You are the sunrise after the storm, the candle still burning in the dark, the proof that even shattered hearts can glow again. So don't rush to fix the pieces. Sit with them. Honor the woman you were before the hurt, and the one who's still standing after. Because if you listen close enough, you'll hear it. The quiet voice beneath all the pain whispering, "You're still here. And that means you've already won." And as for me, I still light my candles every night, not for who I lost, but for who I found, myself, and Lord, she's worth every flame.